if you ask someone to picture a demon, you get a very specific, instantly recognizable image in your head.
Oh, absolutely. It's a totally defined category of supernatural terror.
Right. I mean, it's all horns, pitchforks, smelling like sulfur, maybe a spitting head, if you're, a big fan of classic horror movies.
Yeah, there's no ambiguity about what you are dealing with there.
Exactly. And yet, if you ask that same person to picture a giant, you are suddenly in a completely different movie genre.
Oh, totally. You're thinking of, like, Jack and the Beanstalk.
Yeah. Heavy footsteps, shaking the ground, massive wooden clubs, high fantasy stuff. Those two concepts do not belong in the same cinematic universe.
Not at all.
But then you step into the world of ancient history, and suddenly those two entirely distinct concepts collide in this bizarre millennia-long game of telephone.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. So today's mission on this deep dive is to figure out where our concept of demons actually comes from.
Yeah.
And specifically, how it directly connects to the Nephilim, the giants mentioned in the Book of Genesis.
And we've been looking through a massive stack of sources to figure this out for you.
Oh, yeah. Everything from ancient etymology dictionaries and Greek philosophy to the writings of early church fathers like Justin Martyr and St. Augustine.
It's a lot of material.
It is. And honestly, the origin story is completely different from what Hollywood tells us. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, what's fascinating here is that almost everything modern people believe about this topic is a massive historical mashup.
A total mashup.
Right. To visualize what we are going to be talking about today, imagine our studio backdrop right now as a morphing visual. It starts off as this pristine, sunlit, ancient Greek temple.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
But then, slowly, stone by stone, it shifts into a dark, medieval, illuminated manuscript filled with monsters.
That is such a cool way to picture it.
Yeah, that gradual, strange mutation is exactly what happens to the concept we are looking at today.
So, to really understand demons, we first have to completely strip away all that spooky horror movie baggage, right?
Absolutely. You have to go back to the original Greek word.
Right, because the English word demon comes directly from the ancient Greek word daimon. And if you dig into the etymology dictionaries, that derives from the Proto-Indo-European root day.
Which simply means to divide or to provide destinies.
Exactly. It has absolutely zero spooky connotations.
None at all. I mean, in ancient Greece, daemons were tutelary deities.
And what does that mean exactly in that context?
Well, if we break that term down, a tutelary deity is essentially a localized guardian spirit. Think of them as assigned protectors for a specific person, a specific temple, or even an entire city.
So they were kind of like middle management.
Yeah, exactly. They were intermediaries passing between the realm of the ultimate gods and the realm of mortals.
I love the analogy one of the sources used to describe this because it brings it right into the modern day for you.
Oh, the smartphone one.
Yes. Think of the original Greek daemon less like a monster hiding under your bed and more like a background app running on your smartphone.
That is so accurate.
Right. It's just a neutral worker passing data back and forth between the operating system and the user interface. It's not good. It's not evil. It's just doing a job.
And the crazy thing is, we actually still use the word that way today.
We do. In computer science, a daemon, spelled with an A-E, is literally a program running quietly in the background.
And in physics, too, there's a famous thought experiment called Maxwell's daemon, which is just a hypothetical microscopic entity sorting fast and slow molecules.
Just a worker?
Exactly. That background worker analogy perfectly captures the ancient Greek worldview. I mean, Socrates famously claimed to have an inner daimonion.
Wait, Socrates? Like the philosopher?
The very same. He described it as a sort of divine something, like a voice that would chime in to warn him against making mistakes.
Oh, wow. So it was like his conscience.
Pretty much. Notice the function there. It didn't command him or possess him. It just acted as an internal moral check.
That's fascinating.
And if you read Plato's Symposium, the priestess Diotima teaches Socrates that love itself is a great daemon. She describes love as this force interpreting and transporting human prayers up to the gods and bringing divine gifts down to men.
So it's basically a cosmic mail carrier.
Right. And like any mail carrier, they didn't care about the contents of the message. They were just delivering the mail.
That makes total sense.
Now, that neutral definition held for a long time. But as we move into the Hellenistic period, so this is the era after Alexander the Great conquered much of the known world cultures started blending heavily.
Right, because you have Greek philosophy mixing with Persian and Egyptian ideas.
Exactly. Society was getting vastly more complex, and people needed a way to explain the randomness of life. I mean, why did one person have incredible luck while another suffered a sudden illness?
They needed someone to blame, basically.
Precisely. To explain this, the Greeks started dividing these previously neutral entities into two distinct categories. They created the agatha daimon, which were the good, noble spirits bringing fortune.
And then the bad ones.
Right, the kakodaimon, which were the malevolent bad spirits bringing ruin.
But originally, the word itself was just a blank slate.
Completely neutral.
Just imagine how jarring it would be for you if a word that basically meant helpful life coach or background assistant suddenly mutated over the centuries. Mutated to become the universal, ultimate word for pure evil.
It would be entirely unrecognizable to the people who coined it.
So if this Greek word was just a neutral background worker, a helpful guide, how on earth does it end up in our English Bibles as a pitchfork-wielding creature of darkness?
Well, that leap didn't happen overnight.
No, based on the sources, it started with one of the most consequential translation choices in human history. And it happened down in ancient Egypt.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture of the ancient Mediterranean, we really have to look at Alexandria, Egypt.
Right, the massive melting pot.
Exactly. In the centuries before the Common Era, you had a huge population of Greek-speaking Jews living there who could no longer read ancient Hebrew.
So they needed a translation.
They did. They needed to translate their Hebrew Old Testament into Greek just to be able to study it. This translation project became known as the Septuagint. And, you know, translating ancient texts is never just swapping one word for another.
Right, it's so much more complicated than that. You are constantly running into cultural concepts that simply don't exist in the target language.
It's a translator's nightmare.
It's like localizing a video game or a comedy movie for a completely different country. Sometimes the joke or the cultural reference just doesn't translate, so you have to find a localized equivalent that kind of gets the point across.
That is precisely the challenge they faced. When these translators came across certain Hebrew words related to foreign gods or bizarre local idols, they were stuck.
Because the Greeks didn't have words for those specific things.
Right. The Greeks didn't have words for these highly specific ancient Near Eastern entities. So the translators opted for a broad umbrella term. They used the Greek word daimonian.
Okay, and what were the original Hebrew words they were trying to translate?
They specifically used it to translate two very strange Hebrew words, shadim and seir.
Okay, let's look at those words, because here is the massive catch. Those Hebrew words did not mean invisible evil spirits floating around possessing people.
Not even close.
According to the etymology dictionaries we reviewed, shadim is actually a loan word from the Assyrian word shedu. And a shedu referred to these mythological, physical guardian creatures.
Right. Think of the giant winged bulls with human heads you see in museums, or griffins.
Exactly. And the other word, seir, literally just translates to hairy or he-goat. So they were essentially talking about satyrs or goat demons of the desert.
So when the Greek translators saw these references to Assyrian winged bulls and Canaanite goat gods, they needed a Greek word that meant lesser localized deity.
And daimonian fit the bill perfectly.
It did. They were basically saying, hey, these are the weird tutelary deities of our neighbors.
Okay, I have to jump in and push back here, because this sounds wild. When the Old Testament condemns the Israelites for sacrificing to demons, were they literally just talking about sacrificing to hairy goats and griffins?
That is the crucial question.
I mean, did the biblical writers genuinely believe these mythological monsters were real physical threats roaming the desert?
Textual evidence points to no. They didn't view them as real, roaming, living entities.
What were they doing?
The Hebrew writers were using these terms pejoratively. They were actively mocking Canaanite and Assyrian idols. They were basically calling the gods of their neighbors mythological garbage.
Wow, okay.
And we see a massive clue in how the Septuagint handled the word seir in the book of Leviticus. Instead of translating it as a spirit or a creature, they translated it with the Greek word matawa,
Which
means emptiness or worthless things.
Oh, wow. So they aren't saying you are sacrificing to dangerous, invisible monsters. They are saying you are sacrificing to literal emptiness.
Right. You're giving your livestock to nothing.
To the ancient Israelites, these weren't invisible entities hiding in the shadows waiting to possess someone. They were empty, powerless statues of wood and stone.
Exactly. They were what the prophets called no gods.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
But, you know, it immediately leads to an obvious mystery.
The New Testament connection.
Right. If the Old Testament didn't feature roaming, possessing spirits, where did the New Testament get them? Because you open up the Gospels and suddenly Jesus is casting out unclean spirits left and right.
It's a completely different landscape.
It really is. I mean, they are speaking through people. They are throwing people into fires. Where did this entire cast of invisible antagonists come from?
For that answer, we have to look at the massive cultural and theological shift that happened during the Second Temple period.
Which is the era between the Old and New Testaments, right?
Exactly. It was a time of intense theological development, apocalyptic writing, and a deep, deep fascination with the Book of Genesis.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to talk about Genesis chapter 6.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of the most famous and frankly incredibly strange narratives in the entire Bible. It's the story where the sons of God, who were understood to be angels, also known as the Watchers, come down to earth and mate with the daughters of men.
And the offspring of this bizarre, forbidden union are the Nephilim, the giants.
Right. And this narrative wasn't just some brief, skippable footnote to ancient readers, was it?
Oh, definitely not. This was a foundational, world-breaking event for them. To understand the origin of New Testament demons, we have to look at the apocryphal Book of Enoch.
Because Enoch was wildly popular in the ancient world, especially during that Second Temple period.
Extremely popular. And Enoch chapter 15 provides a highly detailed, mechanical explanation of what happened to these Nephilim giants.
Right, because Enoch lays out the metaphysical rules. It claims that when these hybrid giants were finally killed off, their physical bodies decayed, but their spirits were trapped.
Because they were a hybrid.
Exactly. They were an unholy hybrid of heavenly angelic essence and earthly human flesh, so their spirits couldn't return to heaven. But they also couldn't just pass on to the afterlife like normal human souls.
What if they were stuck?
Yeah, they were condemned to remain on earth as disembodied wandering spirits.
And these disembodied spirits of dead giants became the evil spirits. They're the demons that afflict humanity.
Wow.
And Enoch makes a very clear, sharp distinction that is almost entirely lost in modern theology.
What's the distinction?
The original fallen angels, the sons of God, who committed the actual sin of coming to earth, they were punished immediately. They were locked away in chains in deep subterranean darkness.
Right. The New Testament books of Jude and 2 Peter even explicitly reference those specific angels being chained in gloomy darkness until Judgment Day.
Exactly. So the entities roaming the earth, causing sickness, madness, and seeking to possess people, those aren't the fallen angels themselves.
They're the kids.
Right. They are the lingering ghost spirits of their bastard giant offspring.
I was looking through our research notes, and there was this linguistic detail that just blew my mind.
Oh, the Isaiah connection.
Yes. There is a Hebrew word in the Old Testament, rapha, specifically in Isaiah 26. The notes said it translates to shades or dead spirits who will not rise. How does that connect to the giants?
It is a brilliant linguistic link. That Hebrew word rapha, meaning the spirits of the dead, shares the exact same root as the word rephaim.
And the Rephaim is the biblical name for the terrifying tribes of post-flood giants.
Yes. So even baked into the language itself, the ancient Israelites were connecting the concept of dead, lingering spirits directly back to the giants.
That makes the New Testament accounts make so much more sense.
It really does, contextually.
When you read the Gospels, these demons are constantly seeking to inhabit physical bodies. They drive people into the wilderness or they live among the tombs. They're obsessed with the physical world.
Because they used to have physical bodies.
Right. And if they are the ghost spirits of giants who once had massive, insatiable physical appetites, I mean, the myths say they devoured everything in their path. It makes total sense that their disembodied spirits are desperately seeking a physical vessel to experience the material world again.
The worldview was completely integrated. It explained the mechanics of possession perfectly to the ancient mind.
Okay, so this wasn't just some fringe late-night conspiracy theory that a few ancient people whispered about in the dark.
Oh, no, not at all.
This giant spirit theory was actually the mainstream dominant worldview of the early Triton Church.
Unquestionably. I mean, if you read the greatest thinkers and apologists of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, people like Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Pythagoras, they fully embraced the Enoch narrative.
They didn't just tolerate it, right?
No, they wrote about it explicitly as core doctrine. There's even a text from Pseudo Clement that elaborates on what these flesh-bound angels were doing before the flood wiped them out.
Oh, yeah, the metallurgy stuff.
Right. It claims they taught human women metallurgy to make swords, magic, and astrology, and even how to dye garments and use cosmetics to make themselves more alluring.
I was trying to figure out why the early church loved this weird hybrid meeting theory so much. And then I tried to put myself in the shoes of an early Christian in the 2nd century.
It's a very different world.
It is.
Huh?
You are looking around at a world completely dominated by Greco-Roman paganism. Every city has temples to Zeus, Apollo, Athena, and you believe there's only one true God.
Right.
But you also can't deny that these pagan temples seem to have power. Maybe people are being healed there, or they're experiencing real spiritual phenomena. How do you explain that without admitting the Greek gods are actually real?
That was the exact philosophical trap they were in. If the pagan gods aren't real, why does their religion seem to work? Why are the Greeks experiencing supernatural events?
Right. And that's when I realized this Enoch narrative was basically their unified field theory for religion.
That's a great way to phrase it.
It solved everything. The early church fathers argued that the pagan gods were just the Nephilim spirits. They were these dead giants masquerading as deities.
Tricking people.
Yeah, they tricked humans into worshiping them, demanding animal sacrifices so they could feed their lingering, ghostly lusts for the smell of blood and roasting flesh. It perfectly explained the reality of pagan religion. It explained where magic came from, and it preserved the idea of one true God.
It was an incredibly elegant theological solution for its time. It provided a comprehensive explanation for idolatry and systemic evil.
It wrapped it all up in a bow.
Exactly. The corruption of the world wasn't just bad human behavior, it was the lingering, engineered corruption of the Watchers and their giant offspring.
Okay, but this brings us to a massive brick wall.
The modern-day gap.
Yes, if the early church universally believed that demons were the ghosts of dead giants, why don't we hear this in Sunday school today? I mean, that is a wildly entertaining story.
It is a great story.
But it's totally absent from modern mainstream theology. What happened to the giants?
Well, what happened was a major theological PR crisis in the 5th century. Christianity had grown, and it was now intersecting with the highest levels of Roman intellectual society.
They were rubbing shoulders with the elites.
Exactly. And by this time, highly educated, elite critics of Christianity like the philosopher Celsus and later the Emperor Julian the Apostate, they were weaponizing this exact belief against the church.
They were essentially reading the Christian text and saying, hold on. You Christians make fun of us Romans for believing that Jupiter turned into a swan to seduce a woman. But you guys literally believe that invisible angels came down from heaven, had biological relations with human women, and fathered giant mutant babies.
Right. You're just as absurd as we are.
Yeah, they were calling them out on the hypocrisy.
That was exactly the critique. It became a serious intellectual liability for a church that was trying to present itself as the rational, ultimate truth of the universe.
They needed to clean house.
They did. Julius Africanus started the trend of reinterpreting Genesis, but it was St. Augustine, arguably one of the most influential thinkers in Western history, who officially changed the narrative.
He brought in the PR spin.
He did. To solve this PR crisis, Augustine championed what is now called the Sethite theory.
Okay, let's break down the Sethite theory, because this is the pivot point where our modern understanding of demons is actually born.
It's the turning point.
Augustine argued that the sons of God, mentioned in Genesis 6, were not angels at all. He claimed they were just righteous human men from the godly lineage of Seth, who is Adam's son.
And the daughters of men weren't just random women.
Right, they were wicked human women from the cursed lineage of the murderer, Cain.
By redefining those terms, Augustine completely removed the supernatural element from the Genesis narrative.
Just wiped it out.
Gone. Under his new framework, demons are absolutely not the ghost spirits of dead giants. Instead, he argued that demons were simply the original angels who rebelled and fell with Satan at the very dawn of creation.
Long before humans even existed.
Exactly. This is the fallen angel theory that almost everyone is familiar with today. Augustine essentially deleted the giants from the demonic origin story.
Wow.
And by doing this, he was able to flip the script on the Greco-Roman critics. He pointed out the hypocrisy of Roman myths, noting how gods like Venus and Mars commit adultery with mortals all the time, yet the gods punish humans for the exact same crimes.
It was a brilliant rhetorical move by Augustine to win the debate. But I'm sorry, I have to point out the glaring plot hole here.
The genetics.
Yes. Okay, so under this new theory, a righteous, totally normal human guy from the line of Seth marries a wicked, totally normal human girl from the line of Cain. How does a good guy marrying a bad girl produce a literal 30-foot giant?
It doesn't.
That is not how genetics work.
No, it is a massive interpretive leap. And Augustine, being a brilliant thinker, he knew it was a vulnerability in his argument. He knew people would ask where the giants came from, if not from angels.
So how did he defend it?
He argued that giants can exist naturally, just as a rare quirk of human biology. Seriously, how on earth did he justify that?
Well, he actually cited an anecdote about a famously tall woman he heard about in Rome.
Wait, a tall woman, that's his defense?
Yeah. He wrote that this woman overtopped everyone in the city by a massive margin, even though both of her parents were of completely average stature.
That is wild.
Therefore, he argued, you don't need supernatural angelic DNA to get a giant. Sometimes random genetic mutations happen and people are just born really big.
I am genuinely in disbelief that this is the argument that changed Western theology. He is citing a tall woman he saw in Rome to explain away the Nephilim.
It's pretty incredible.
That is incredibly flimsy. Our sources highlight modern commentators like Chuck Missler, who point out that the Sethite view practically tortures the original Hebrew text.
Oh, it completely twists the language.
Right, because the specific term used in Genesis, B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, is used consistently in the Old Testament to refer to divine beings or angels, never just righteous human men.
Never.
Augustine really had to wrestle the text to the ground and force it to fit his new narrative. He absolutely forced it. But we have to understand the power dynamics at play here. Because of Augustine's immense authority, and because the church desperately needed to be intellectually respectable in the Roman Empire, the Sethite theory won the day.
It was politically necessary.
Exactly. The Book of Enoch was marginalized and eventually pushed out of the canon entirely in the West. The giant ghost theory was quietly buried.
And the idea that demons are simply fallen angels became the unquestioned absolute standard doctrine for the next 1,500 years.
Just like that.
So what does this all mean for you listening at home? When we look back at the journey we've just taken, the modern concept of a demon is a massive historical mashup.
It really is.
You start with a Greek word for a neutral background life coach. You mix in Greek translations of Assyrian winged bulls and Canaanite goat idols. You toss in the apocryphal wandering ghosts of bloodthirsty dead giants.
It's quite the recipe.
Right. And finally, you filter that entire chaotic mixture through a 5th century PR campaign by St. Augustine just to make it intellectually respectable to Roman philosophers.
It is a staggering evolution. And, you know, when you are reading ancient texts today, whether that's the Old Testament, the New Testament, or Greek philosophy, you really have to strip away centuries of cultural baggage.
You can't just project backwards.
Exactly. We can't just project our 21st century horror movie definitions backward. We have to look at the mechanics of what the authors were actually saying within their own historical worldview. Language and theology are living, breathing things. They adapt to the anxieties of their time.
And it leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, what is it?
Today, in our modern culture, we don't really talk much about literal monsters hiding in the dark or giant ghosts possessing people. Instead, we use the word metaphorically. We talk about battling our inner demons, our anxieties, our addictions, our deep-seated fears.
Right, we've internalized the conflict. The battleground is entirely psychological now.
Exactly. But here's the crazy part. What if modern psychology hasn't actually invented a new metaphor at all?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
What if, by turning the concept inward to describe our own character, our flaws, and the unseen forces driving our behavior, we have accidentally circled all the way back to the original ancient Greek daimon?
Yeah.
We've got right back to the idea of an internal character, a fate, and a guiding force that lives strictly inside our own minds.
It's the ultimate full circle. We've returned to the source without even realizing it.
It really makes you think differently about the words we use every single day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.